Hello and welcome to the Wire Talks. I'm Sidharth Bhatia. The northern parts of India have been hit by severe floods in recent weeks. Floods in Himachal Pradesh, Jammu and Kashmir, and Punjab have taken lives and destroyed property and crops worth crores of rupees. In addition, floods have also ravaged Gurugram and Delhi, among other towns and cities. Many crucial questions arise. What are the reasons for this? Is it because of natural causes, heavy rains, and a cloudburst, or due to poor infrastructure and poor governance? And is there any way to mitigate them? And more importantly, will this now be an annual affair? My guest in today's podcast has often dealt with these questions. Mihir Bhatt is an architect and urban planner based in Ahmedabad and is the director of the All India Disaster Mitigation Institute, a leading South Asian initiative advancing disaster risk reduction and climate resilience. With over 30 years behind him, he has worked extensively on flood preparedness and recovery with leading institutions here and abroad. Mir Bhatt, welcome to the Wire Talks. Mir, to begin with, is what happened this year, floods and landslides at the same time in all these states that I mentioned, as well as in some cities, is what happened this year unusual?
Um, Floods is the future, if one could be so bold and provocative. Unfortunately, yes, we are seeing more frequent and more intense urban flooding events across India. What happened in Gurugram and Delhi is not an exception. It's a sign of what lies ahead if we continue with business as usual. Climate change and its impact is intensifying rainfall pattern. The way we are developing, our cities are developing, is not making it easy. The bigger failure is how our cities are designed, planned, and managed and continue to grow. Yes, so in short, future is flooding, urban flooding.
Uh, that's a very, if I may say, scary prospect. But we'll come to that in some detail further down. But what happened? What happened in each location, ranging from the landslides in, say, Himachal Pradesh, and flooding in Gurugram when people were stuck for hours in traffic jams. Has what happened different in each location? Different causes, different kind of, you know, is are there material differences in these places?
I think there is similarities in their differences, and three areas of similarities which shows the difference. And all of them are related to urban infrastructure failing. What is happening or what's similar, which shows what the difference is the design mismatch. So what is happening is that our stormwater systems and drainage networks are built for rainfall pattern for the past, not for the present, or even less for the future. 1 in 50 year rainfall is now happening almost every 5 years, but that's not reflected in the way we design. That's one similarity which is the difference in each of the location, landslide or in terms of urban flooding. The second is the encroachment on the infrastructure and loss of natural buffer. So infrastructure per se doesn't function without the context within which it is functioning. That context includes the rest of the city, at least the part of the city around which infrastructure is built, but also the natural buffers that are around the infrastructure where additional water can seep in, stand, or flood. It may be in the forms of lakes, ponds, wetlands, drainage channels. It may be built over. Gurugram's rapid urbanization filled in natural catchments. that once absorbed excess water from the surrounding area. So that encroachment and loss of natural buffers is another cause, which is both similar, which is common to all three, but it is also different in each of the locations. Localized differences are there. And third is the governance gap, if you may say. And that's not governance in terms of corporate top-down departmental governance alone, and the limitations of that we know. But urban plans and their performance are not enforced. So we have plans which perform, but perform differently, perform partly, perform much slower than the plan is supposed to, as anticipated to perform. That's one part of the governance gap. Other governance gap is maintenance of drains is neglected, for example. So maintenance is also another gap. Then the responsibilities are fragmented between agencies. That is something true for disaster agencies, non-disaster agencies. Somehow we've not found a way of dealing with that. In all three locations, this has come out clearly. More will come out when a better assessment is done. And the last thing I would like to add within governance gap is that even planned cities are failing because enforcement is weak and citizens' needs are not integrated. And by citizens, I mean citizens who are vulnerable, citizens who were affected last time during flood, citizens which are poor, citizens who are migrant to the city, and their needs for protection from the flood and such natural disasters is not integrated in the plan itself. So these are the three areas which make them, which are common to show their dissimilarities between each of the three locations: encroachment and loss of natural buffers, governance gap, and of course, what I said in the to start with, the design mistake. Thank you.
No, it's interesting you say design mismatch because you mentioned a little while during this answer that the entire infrastructure planning was done for a different time, and things have changed. Now, things have changed for several reasons. One is population growth, one is perhaps climate change, perhaps unmitigated, rampant construction, much of it also breaking regulations. But how could have somebody planning that far back or even 10 years ago planned for what was to come? How could they have done it? Is that what you're suggesting, is that they should update these things almost on a annual basis or a regular basis, or they just let it go?
So I think there are several ways of addressing uh, your question. One is that this whole idea of master plan, that you plan for 10 years, 50 years, 20 master plan, is top down, which is technology driven, which is based on structures, which is based on land utilization and land use planning, which is done by a team of a few people. That period, which was um, the sort of last phase of imperial expansion, that part of the history is gone. And as an independent country, we came out with new planning processes, new cities, and beautiful ones. Some of them very well done as well. Um, but they did not consider a couple of things. One is anticipation of what was to come in terms of matching the changes that were taking place and were to take place because of development paths that we had taken. So that's one. Second, also these plans were very rigid. It didn't have the agility that a plan should have to keep on changing to the changing context of the context, political, economic context within which it was happening. So that was another difficulty with this. Third, the plans were not performing, and as a result, you had a backlog of lack of performance and new planning needs, both of them adding up to what was to be addressed. Uh, course, the climate science was obviously at the time not so accurate, not so predictive. We didn't know enough about what was happening, the way we were developing, and that something was not in the hands of the planner. But they could have, we could have, as planners, made some more listening to what is happening to other disciplines, such as climate science, uh, environmental science, and start integrating that into both our planning, the plan itself, but also in the planning process. Those were the fourth and fifth, which is in the last, not last in terms of the list, but last for my answer, is the risk-informed planning. The planning was assumed, was very much, and it was called development plan. So we assume that you just develop and there is not going to be any disruption to development or interruption to the development of the city by the disaster risk and other risks. It wasn't risk informed, and that's something again needs to be done in the plans that we produce now on.
So, as a native of Mumbai, I can tell you that uh, we experience flooding in so-called low-lying areas for the last many years. This year, it was for some reason better because massive pumps were installed. But any citizen could see the following: A, we live close to the sea, and therefore the drainage system has to be designed in a particular way when there is high tide and when there is massive rainfall, which is 4 months a year. And during those 4 months, at least a few episodes of massive rainfall when everything comes to a halt. And the development plans, by the time they are signed off by everybody, it's a 10-year development plan. 5 years have already passed. So clearly that I would count as a governance failure, because everything you have done is already outdated. Of course, there are other factors like un, un, the construction that's going on in this city, massive construction, and I would say in every city. You've got digging everywhere, you've got pollution, you've got all that. So I think that is a commonality in the entire country, isn't it, in urban areas?
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree more with with you. Um, that's all across India that is happening, and at least so. In fact, there are a couple of questions that any urban area should be asking, and this is I'm drawing from uh, our work with UP State Disaster Management Authority in terms of flooding. Looking at the one is if you look at people, um, and this is for rural areas, not so much urban. The question which is so central is that are swimming skills being taught in flood-prone districts, the life-saving measure, education? But it's just very rare, especially in districts like Balia, Deoria, for example. Look at as the baseline survey being done to assess uh, uh, flooding that is taking place, not knowing the baseline, and then doesn't help making plans. Other community level infrastructure or local rescue spots that we have designed. And again, that's not there, and the list is much longer. So I think the planning gap, which you mentioned, is increasing, both in terms of what is planned for and the performance or growth of the city is over. Then the performance of the plan and the performance, that's the gap, which has also increased and increasing very rapidly. And third, the plan, which was made in the context of changing climate, has not been incorporated. What is needed is a range of retrofitting plans, if that's the word we could use. that how rapidly, without any additional cost or additional effort, but lot of additional thinking, we do the same thing but different. Same bridge, but how do you build that differently? Same bus stop, but how do we build that differently? And that something is done and easily done at very little cost or hardly any cost all across Indian cities. But there are scattered examples not put together to make something sensible for a whole city plan, or that are not being picked up as quickly as they can from one city to another, from one urban area or what to another.
Since you mentioned rural areas, let's take the example of Uttarakhand, where at least once or twice in the last 5 years, similar situations have been observed. And the same thing happened, unbridled construction and rains coming. There's a cloudburst, and the river flows and finds that on the dry bed, or very close to the dry bed, there are hotels constructed, homes constructed, and those homes just get washed away. Maybe this is a amateur's way of thinking, but uh, that's more than a failure of governance. No, that's absolutely clear cut lack of thinking and allowing all kinds of construction to go on without any kind of obstacle or regulations.
Um,
And it
yes,
could
of
be
course.
corruption, it could be corruption, it could be greed, it could be just lack of application.
I see that around a lot. I see that in, especially when the disaster management plans are made, especially disaster management. We've done more than 60 disaster management plans across 10, 12 states of India. And what we found is that, as against what you just said, there is a tremendous interest and understanding and insight among various sections of the society, come up with a district disaster management plan, which is very practical, which is very doable, which is very much cost effective, and in which actually you can start implementing that. So that harnessing the uh, intelligence and enthusiasm and interest in making our cities and in our case districts um, disaster risk free or disaster risk prepared, we can make far more of that than we have done so far. Let me give another example from Nagaland. And one doesn't think of disasters at Nagaland, but some very interesting work is being done there. Recently, all the local bodies, lower than the state level, they decided and demanded to the state authority, would you help us make resilience plans for each of our local bodies? And the state authority agreed. Then, in one go, in 3 days, 39 different local bodies came with their chairperson, came with their CEO, came with their planning officer, sit down and in 3 days come up with a plan where they could identify resilience risk, ways of mitigating it, including adaptation, and the ways of projectizing that and funding it and submit it to the state authority, put in the budget. So when we want to do something which is responsive, bottom up, which is participatory, is action oriented, it's possible in the same country, even in a far off area such as Nagaland. That perhaps it is the only state where all the local bodies have at least some resilience plan made and ready, which can be funded. So this gap doesn't necessarily should exist either in urban areas or in rural areas. Possible to surmount that gap.
I wanted you to comment. Um, what you're saying covers all that, but I still wanted to bring in this thing about A city like Bangalore, landlocked and full of very smart people working in technology companies, uh, and where property sells for quite a lot of money. And then Gurugram, where a penthouse sold for something like a rupees 190 crores. And this, I'm going by reports in the Economic Times, so they can't be that. So they are not speculative. These are cities in which the wealthy and the, shall we say, smart, both uh, live, and nothing has come, no demand has come from that end, or no solution has come from that end to say, listen, this is enough. We pay taxes. I'm spending a lot of money buying this property, or I have a solution. I find that, especially in the context of what you just said about Nagaland, where it came from the bottom up, I find this deeply ironical, wouldn't you say?
I it is ironic, and if one had to give a title to that irony, I think the title would be "Living Life Dangerously." I think the more high net worth individual you are, more dangerously you live. And I think we become more conscious about financial risk, and even more conscious, and even more conscious. But while doing so, we become less and less conscious about clean air, drinkable water, non-polluted food, and flooding and extreme heat, for example. And that's the irony of the development path that we have taken, which is not developing with nature, but at the cost of nature. And the way out of that, as I see, and I've seen that actually happening in so many instances, is to develop with nature. In fact, not only restore nature to our planning, maybe flood plan, or it may be extreme heat plan, it may be a disaster development plan, or an urban development plan. The planning, urban plan, restoring nature that cities have destroyed. How do you do that? And it's possible. We have examples. It just needs to be put together so that we actually move towards that path. There is a national initiative of 100 cities, each of the city having one large urban forest. And I hope that takes off very well. And I hope that happens all across the country. But if that's possible, why one forest? Why not many? Why only 100 cities? Why not every city? And why do you wait till the city grows? Why not that before city grows, they must start planting trees? And we have the money now, we have the resources, we know the ways of planting this. I think it's very much possible. I hope some of the individuals and uh, organizations that they work for will take that up as part of their corporate work.
That will definitely demand not just civic sense but also civic engagement. And
Yes, yes.
um, you know, I this may sound excessively cynical, but sometimes that is missing. I read, you must have read about these expatriates living in Gurgaon coming out on the street and cleaning up the streets of the city. And it's just one of those things people do anywhere else. Moving on, you mentioned what policy makers can do to improve this situation for the future, because you also began by saying that this is the future. We are living with the future already, and it is possible that things may get worse. Has any Have you, your organization, you personally got involved in helping people come up with something like this?
So we work on extreme events. And extreme heat, we've done a lot of work. Extreme flood, flooding, we've also done work. Let me give some examples. We work at policy performance and see that various national and local policies have included extreme events. A good example would be at a national level, national adaptation planning has opened up, and we were invited to contribute. And we pointed out, of course, with politeness, that there was far more could be added in terms of extreme heat and extreme flood that the adaptation plan currently has, especially focusing on urban flood. So that's at the policy performance level. At the state level, for example, government brought up the child protection policy. And we said that protecting child from extreme heat and extreme flood is as important as it is protecting child from an accident or any other thing that happens. And that is very carefully considered. So that's sort of one area where we are directly involved. We also build capacity, and we assume that the best way to build capacity is to start where the capacity is. So you leverage the capacity that exists even after a major disaster, maybe having the extreme heat wave to do that. And there we have found, for example, that hundreds and hundreds of small businesses across at least 11 cities want to find ways to use very little saving that they have differently so that they can save both their life and their livelihood to do that. So that's another area of leveraging capacity, again, bottom up at a large section of the affected population. Third is very exciting to have pilots. I think we've not used that concept enough after the second or third 5-year plan. We need to have a lot of pilots where people's creativity, imagination, enterprise, resourcefulness comes out, and then upscale them. And one of the pilots we are doing right now is to see that with a very small intervention with the urban transportation workers, drivers and conductors, what a difference can you make? And we work with Ahmedabad Municipal Transport Service, very small intervention, almost negligible, but what we were able to achieve is absenteeism due to extreme heat during this year's summer reduced to half, and visits to uh, health clinic again reduced to half. So with just regular drinking, adequate and good water during the working hours can bring down such dramatic changes. So I think that's a third area where we are doing and something more, a lot more can be done. A lot of other people are also working on that. The list is long. Third is evaluation. Don't review our performance. The flood plan, and each year we have floods. But what did we learn from the previous flood, so that we do that differently? And that happens, but not as much as it should, so that we don't repeat the mistakes we've done. And once we learn that, we don't share that learning across the flooding areas, so that they don't have to learn it from the experience. That's third area, and we have just finished the large review of what brings state leadership in flood preparedness and which don't lead because of the water factors. And something that we presented recently in Bihar with the UNDP, that how to states gain leadership position in extreme events. So that's fourth. Five, the fifth perhaps where we work, we find equally rewarding, is gaining our own knowledge and putting it together for our students and our faculty to use. So examples that we have is from other countries, other locations, which we must, but our own experience needs to get in more. And that's something where we are working on. And some very good work is being done by TIS, for example, by the Indian Institute of Habitat Studies in Bangalore, for example, National Institute for Disaster Management. So there are organizations doing it. We just need to put it into our education system far better, planning education system as well. Thank you.
Uh, is pressure also, you said local bodies in 39 Nagaland districts, 39 local bodies. Is pressure also coming from bottom up, people who suffer, people who then get together and demand, or solutions coming from bottom up?
Yes, to both your questions. And let's get the part first. There, I think if there is any place where absolutely large number of variety of diverse solutions that are coming up, that's India. I mean, you just go to any ward, municipal ward, you go to any construction site, you go to any local school, for example, and some innovation, some initiative to do things differently without additional resources, without additional too much material need people are doing. And I wouldn't say thousands, I think millions are solutions being generated every time. Our people are just so resourceful. What we are doing it but not doing enough is to capture those solutions and then augment them and find various alternatives instead of standardizing that, and not alternative as something one against the other, but alternative as one and this and this and this, and put that together at a ward level, city level, district level, state level, country level. And that's something a lot of effort and resources needs to go there. Lots of solutions coming up. The other day we were talking with a group of homeless people in 32 homeless shelters for the homeless in Ahmedabad. And we just said that, look, of course you couldn't possibly know you are homeless, but what kind of measures should a person who has home should be taking to fight against extreme heat or extreme flooding in Ahmedabad city? And more than 300 absolutely practical, very useful solutions came from them. So, our people, and I'm not surprised, and we shouldn't be surprised because they actually suffer. So, if they don't think of the solution, they will die. So, they would much rather find a solution and use as best as they can with their limited resources than wait for somebody else to do that.
So,
I
coming back, looping back to your first answer, uh, looping back to your first answer, I said I'll pick up a point and say, for the time being, while many solutions are being worked out, perhaps not even listened to, but maybe they are, by the time plans are made, what we saw in Gurugram, what we saw in Himachal, what we saw in Delhi, we forget Delhi, which is again a landlocked place, and is not used to heavy rains. When the heavy rains come, their drainage system just can't handle it. Are these Is this the future for the time being, or for maybe a longer period?
There are three layers. One is the climate science, and very good work done by IIT Delhi at Chitra. Um, um, and his work very clearly shows the way flooding and monsoon is shifting and the way we will be drenched and flooded. And so, yes, that's something we are going to more and more. This is the Pakiza moment. And then there is the way our urban planning is moving. There is some hope with the recent urban development planning and management report, high-powered report, which came out, which talks about professionals. And I'm sure, I hope, and I'm sure that it will include risk-informed planning as well. But till that happens, our regular planning continues, and that leaves us where we are, or not very far from where we are. And third, the way cities are growing in terms of population and people moving in, and people inside the city growing, more and more people, and therefore more and more assets that they have will be affected. So that seems like flooding is our at least near future, if not the long-term future. Um, but I don't see that as a pessimist situation. I think that's absolutely something people like us can use creatively to build something, transform something uh, very new and very useful. And it's definitely possible. So that's something I focus more. And I feel very hopeful that India as a country and Indians as people can do that. If we just let them do that.
Well, well, I do hope your hopefulness is comes true because I think um, for me, having been a citizen of this city, we just take flooding in our stride, and I hope that that doesn't become the norm elsewhere too, because when people in Mumbai look at Delhi and say, "What are you complaining about? You got rains for 4 days, we get for 4 months." But that should not be the point. The point is, yes, rains will come, climate is changing, but life goes on. Life doesn't come to a halt. You don't sit in one of the wealthiest places in this country. You don't sit in a car for 6 hours, 7 hours. That should not be accepted. And I hope solutions come from every angle, because ultimately, you know, you'll see flight, and of course everyone can't move, but you'll see flight, and then some other city will start getting flooded. I mean, why should Bangalore get flooded? There's no reason. But I hope what you're saying is borne out.
No, I hope so too. And Bhatia Sab, let's have another podcast in 2047. And both of us, inshallah, will find out what has happened. I'm quite sure we'll have found a way out.
Yeah, well, in the long term, you know what they say, what Keynes said. But sure, I do hope that solutions get worked out and this happens less and less, because seeing those visuals in Himachal or Uttarakhand is very poignant, and it shouldn't happen to people. And you know who pays the price ultimately.
It's absolutely painful. It's painful to see this in thousands of people in for 6 hours in a car, and even more painful to see that those who didn't have car to go happen to
Yeah,
live in this city.
precisely,
Yeah.
precisely,
And that
precisely,
really motivates us to do whatever we can.
precisely. Well, Mihir, thank you so much. You bring a kind of context and an intellectual approach to the whole thing, but also a practical one. The I like the example of Nagaland. I hope somebody listens to it and says, "Wait a minute, maybe we can do something also." And the examples in other places. Thank you for joining us at the Wire, and we'll keep watching the situation as it unfolds. So thank you. That
Thank you.
was uh, that was Mihir Bhatt, urban planner and architect, talking about disaster mitigation, but mainly talking about the floods that hit took place in some northern states and some northern cities, and what is the long term approach or solutions that will and should emerge to um, to at least, if not end them, because climate change is here, but also to make life a bit less complicated than it is. We'll be back again next week with another guest on the Wire Talks. Till then, from me and the rest of my team, goodbye.